Welcome. Oh, I think I'm muted. Am I muted? Oh, no, I'm not. Sorry for the false start. Welcome, everyone. This is the live stream of the Charmed Life podcast. My name is Tricia Carr. I'm your host here. This podcast is all about magic, metaphysics, mysticism, higher consciousness, and the unconditional love of the universe. We get up to all kinds of exciting and consciousness expanding conversations here. I also will sometimes go live or post just standalone pre-recorded videos of teaching and whatnot. So I am an intuitive, I'm an empathic channel and a spiritual teacher, and I'm also a transpersonal hypnotherapist. So those are some of the topics that you might find me talking about on my own. And as we head into this episode where I'm welcoming on a wonderful guest, I'm very excited to get to talk to. By the way, when I talk to my guests before we come on, and I didn't say to this guest, so I'm saying it to her, she's backstage right now, that I say, you know what, we're just here to be of service and to, platform your amazing work. This is the thing I didn't say to her. And also, maybe we'll just become best friends right in front of the whole world. And that's me being a little stretching it a little bit that the whole world is coming to this, but hey, it's possible, right? So this is the live version of it, but you can also find the recorded podcast any way that you get your podcast, Charmed Life with Tricia Carr, and you will be able to get a little something different and extra with the podcast version of it too, because I always add a little teaching to the end after, if I have a guest, after there's a conversation. And there's often a free gift of an audio or a PDF or something like that. So I want to invite you to also listen to the podcast version. Now, I wanted to bring up just one little topic that has been top of mind for me. And by the way, if you're into human design, and if you ain't in human design, get into it. It is so powerful, so valuable. But I'm a reflector, and reflectors are kind of seeing the big picture for the collective. That's one of our functions. And so when something is showing up synchronistically with me, I have a sense that it might be something to share or talk about with, wherever I'm talking to people. And this is one of the main places. So intuition versus anxiety or reaction. It's really important for us to be able to discern the difference between those. That's how we can understand. Hi, Christy46 Projector on live, coming on live here on the chat. So this is something that I actually either help my clients and students with, or I even just get asked, how can I tell the difference between my intuition and my anxiety, or me being all up in my head? Or again, a reactivity, a reaction that you would be having to something. And the answer is, well, it's a process. And I would say that there is a sort of threshold that we cross through. I think of the magic schools, the mystery schools, where there was an initiation. In human design, there's a deconditioning process. And that is the sense of us actually turning our energy within and getting to know ourselves. Getting to know ourselves and that inner world is the same as getting to know your intuition and getting to know the outer reaches of spirit. And so, one of the processes to be able to do this, I mean, honestly, the base process of this is meditation, or meditation, by the way, is a kind of hypnosis, whether it's self-hypnosis or if someone is guiding you or a track is guiding you, then that would be being hypnotized by someone else. But let's just stick to meditation. And I have a program called Easy Intuition and Meditation, which is a 30-day journey with a ton of meditation audios, as well as lessons that are very attuning on meditation, lessons on meditation on human design, which also helps with that deconditioning or that process of getting to know yourself, your inner self. And also things like divination, which are really powerful tools to help you to see your intuition outpictured for you. And this process is one that can help you. It can help you whether you're in that initiation or if you're in an up leveling. Because even if you are, let's say, a practicing intuitive and you service people with your psychic gifts, we go through up levels all the time where we kind of are not at a reset, but at a new level that we need to go to. So we need to shake things up for our personal practice and our connection with spirit, because we're being beckoned forward to something deeper. So that's one way. That's a process to be able to know the difference between intuition and anxiety. And even today, I want to tell you that your intuition is a calm, soft, subtle, still, loving voice or frequency that you feel in your body. It isn't something that's in your head that's anxious or distorted or disorganized. It is in your body. And sometimes it's a little harder if there's something really challenging going on. And then I would turn you to your heart to know that where how you are anchored in love for yourself and for our beautiful world, or perhaps for your loved ones. Putting up another link here for Empowered Empath, which is for those who are highly empathic, this same process, both these processes. But the love that you have in your heart, if you are concerned for someone else, or if you're concerned about what's going on in your life, anchor into the love. And maybe you're not really sure where to go next, but your love will guide you there. Things like synchronicity, or just the things that you are magnetized toward or magnetized toward you. And that will be the way that spirit, the universe, the field will help you to have your intuitive path laid out for you. So I want to invite you to those things: Empowered Empath or Easy Intuition and Meditation. And with that, I am now ready to welcome on my guest. I'm so excited to talk to Liz Peterson. She is an intuitive energy healer, and she has a podcast called Raise the Vibe with Liz. She is also, as I welcome her on here, hi Liz, a psychic and an author. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Tricia. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm so excited to get into everything that you do. You have a beautiful practice, and I want to hear all about it. I want to hear about your book. And we picked kind of a topic today to talk about grief and the afterlife. So as we head into that, can you get us into the beautiful work or the journey, how you got here, either your journey or the work that you're doing, wherever you want to start?
Wow, the journey of my work, I think, really started when I was a child. Born that sensitive child, my gifts were open. I did go through a time where I did close that down out of fear. So I did step back and then step back into it in my late teens, early 20s, taking polarity therapy, core shamanism, then found my 4-year program where I learned Barbara Brennan's work, became a Reiki Master, did childhood wounding, shadow work. I was gifted to have an instructor that was also a psychotherapist. So we got her work as well. And we were always circling up and sharing and going through our own inner processes while learning the work. So it really was an experience to learn who I was as an individual, what my gifts were, and honing them during that process of opening to them.
Wow, that's wonderful. And I love that you actually had a psychotherapist who was helping you because, we've got that grounded empirical perspective as well. And if you can find a therapist who can support or honor your spiritual gifts, that's fantastic. And by the way, sometimes psychotherapists are not trained to understand that or welcome it in. How was your therapist, like a transpersonal therapist or existential? How did he or
She
she
had a
or they?
spirit. Yeah,
Mhm.
she had a spiritual awakening herself post a
Okay.
divorce. Yeah,
Mm.
and that led her to Barbara Brennan's work, where she fully opened her gifts and learned to accept them for herself and within herself. And then she gifted that to us, that it
That's
is okay,
wonderful.
that we do have these gifts, that we're all born with these gifts, and that we can learn how we work individually and then use that in our lives or in our practices.
And this is another repetitive thing that has been coming up the last like couple of weeks is that many of us, or maybe most or all of us, actually do withhold the opening, that kind of psychic or more transcendent opening, until we are more mature. And I actually learned recently, because I just graduated with my mind body psychology degree. You know who Carl Jung is, C.G. Jung, Swiss, psychologist, one of the fathers of, or pioneers, I prefer to say, of our modern psychoanalytic, psychology. And Carl Jung was himself very spiritual. He actually, even though it's not necessarily detectable, he used astrology and tarot as a basis for a lot of his psychoanalytic theories, and his mother was psychic. And his advice is that we don't really get too transcendent, if you will, until his advice was like 40. And the reason is, if also you can look at the chakra system, or you can look at Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to build the personal self and be grounded in that before we can transcend it. And so I think we are born with these gifts, but this world kind of causes us. That's the problem. It's the world. It's not us. If we if we were living in a perfect world, we could keep our gifts online all the way through, and we would still build the personal self, and then we could get more transcendent maybe a little later. So it's really interesting. And was that the same for your therapist? Was she a little older when that occurred?
She was a little older. She was in her
Yeah.
late 40s, 50s. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love how you pointed that out because it's true. It is these
Mhm.
initiations that we go through in life that kind of bring us to working on that shadow self and working on our wounds and discovering who we are, and then opening more fully, gaining that confidence to step into our gifts. I like how you pointed that out. That was
Yeah,
nice.
and it's stepping into the gifts. Now, this isn't to say you can't be a spiritual or use spiritual, kind of therapies or guidance while you are still in that younger stage of life, but to be
Mhm.
able to be really, to go beyond it. And I would even say, like, if a person's more in that personal development stage, then maybe psychedelic medicine or, plant medicine, it's just it could be a little tricky, you know what I mean? Because we need to anchor in this life, which is the whole purpose that the soul, the soul came here for this purpose, right?
It did. We each have
Mhm.
our own journey and our own purpose. And some of us start off really young and some of us start off later in life.
Mhm.
I feel like we made plans before reincarnated, and it's just how our plans line up in the world where we begin. I'm noticing also, though, a trend towards younger people opening up a little bit more these
Mhm.
days than I saw, when I was younger. When I was younger, there were only a couple of us who were, in our 20s, early 30s, but now I'm seeing them going to workshops and holding classes myself. And there's a lot of younger people. So I think they're being able to learn from our experiences because everything is really on hand right now with social media and being online with everything right now, that they're getting the information. My 16-year-old is having discussions with his friends and with me that I would have never had when I was 16 years old. They're just exposed to so much more. They're able to open up, I think, a little bit sooner. Plus, a lot of children are being born
Yeah.
open, with these gifts functioning, and to parents who are in a space where they have worked on themselves and they have these gifts and they're open, and they encourage them instead of saying it was just a dream or that's just your imagination or something like that. So we're more encouraging our kids, I think, these days than we're encouraged in the past also.
And you can ground your kids in it as well. So, because the parents aren't afraid of it or have at the very minimum, not afraid of it, they can help that balance. So it is definitely possible for spiritual and personal development to coincide. And of course, again, it's not like I was done at 40. I'm all set personally. It's just again, these thresholds that we cross. And, as you said, you mentioned, we have a purpose. So how have you been helping people with grief, and expand on this topic that we've picked about grief in the afterlife and in your work and your experience, if you would.
My experience when my mother passed away last year in February really opened up my life to grief and what that experience was. I'm going to say she gifted me the ability to look throughout my life and see all of the stages and all of the places that I've experienced grief that I didn't have the tools to work on or really embrace those moments and really process through those moments. I was thinking about that this morning, that even though I have worked through my grief with my mom, and this book has really helped me, the writing has helped me, discussing it has helped me, working with my clients around grief has helped me to work on my grief. It's also opened up that portal to my past where I can see where I still need to work on some areas where that grief isn't healed.
Mm.
So it's that opening up to my own personal process and my own experience, then that opened the door to having this avenue for my clients that were now coming to me in resonance with what I had experienced, and being able to work on their grief and going back in time to all of those places where they didn't realize that they were holding grief from their past and carrying it forward and not realizing what was going on within them at the time, that they're struggling, they don't know what's going on. Then when we dive a little deeper, it opens up to all of those places in life where they hadn't recognized that it was grief and that we do need to work on this grief and process it. And I think that's another thing that's opening up right now. We're being gifted, post, what happened from 2020 on, with everybody's struggle and adversity around everything that was going on, it has opened up. Hey, there's this other awareness around loss that's coming forward now, and there's more discussions about it now as well. And I think as I opened up to it, I magnetized people to myself that also had that experience as well.
How do you help people with these, specifically what is your work like? Working one-on-one, working groups? And what is your
Yeah, I do
process?
both. I do one-on-one, I do group work. I'm getting ready to segue from doing group work around my psychic circle class and other workshops that I teach that you can find on Raise the Vibe with Liz, into more group work around grief. I do work individually, one-on-one. I do sessions, personal coaching sessions. I call them intuitive coaching sessions, and you can find those online as well, where we just sit down and we unwrap, what was the cause of the grief, getting in touch with where is the grief in your body, where are you still holding on to that, where are those little tendrils that are still holding on that aren't allowing you to move forward in your life and really thrive after your experience.
Loss is so devastating, and it when we have a loss, we feel like we've lost ourselves, and yet somehow it can be one of the most beautiful, bittersweet, but beautiful gifts as well. And just when you have people who come to you in that depth of grief, does helping them with understanding maybe the eternal perspective, the afterlife, being able to be in touch with how their relationship is continuing, how does that help? If you want to expand on that. I know I just said a lot of things, but
Sure. Yeah, I think bringing that component, if they're open to it, that life does continue after death, that we do have that ability to still have communication with our loved ones on the other side, that does help. It does ease grief. It does bring meaning to the loss. It helps us feel like we're still connected, because when we lose someone that we loved, especially our parents, a spouse or something like that, our heart is broken. We no longer have that person in our life in that physical way. And we really long to have that in our lives. I remember my mom saying that one of the things she missed the most was not being able to call her mother. And that was one of the things I missed the most. But knowing as a psychic, as a medium, as a healer, that she is still with me and she does still give me signs. And I can, even when I'm not feeling her around, ask, hey, are you still with me? Give me a sign that you're still here. Or I just talk to her. Instead of picking up the phone, I have that conversation with her. And I do invite my clients, if that's something that they desire, that they can step into that too and have that connection with their loved one on the other side that maybe they didn't realize they had, or they're getting little glimpses through little signs, butterflies and dragonflies and feathers, that it exists, but helping them to go a little bit further, kind of find peace within themselves, get quiet, listen, and then ask for a sign.
Mm-hmm. And you know your mother so well that as you tap into your heart and have that conversation, it's like, I mean, you know what she would say, or you have a sense of it, and that's real though. That is really her occupying that space and communicating with you, even if a person doesn't know or think that they are a medium. Your heart knows the love that the two of you created and knows how to animate it in your life still. Do you agree? And in addition to, because
I
sometimes
do.
people are like, I'm not seeing any signs. And sometimes it's like, well, if we're looking too much out there, the gift is that we're being asked to go into our heart to find them. Right.
We are. And I really loved what you said at the beginning of the show around going into your heart and leading from that space, because it is through our heart that we have those connections. We're in so much grief because our heart is feeling the loss, because we're feeling the amount of love that we felt for this person. And that love just doesn't go away. And those memories of our loved ones continue in our heart. So really, like you were saying, Tricia, in the beginning, like stepping into our hearts and allowing ourselves to just feel like this is how much I allowed myself to love in this lifetime.
Yeah.
And following that love to the memories. And I can remember too, when my older sister and I were going through the house and we could hear our mother in our mind as we're going through the house, and my sister turns to me, she says, it's like I can hear mom. And it's like, yeah, she's right here with us. She's speaking to us as we're, going through our process and going through her home and organizing everything. She's very much still with us and present.
You said how much I allowed myself to love in this life. That's a big highlight. So beautiful. I love that. I want to say hi to some of the people here. We have Christy. She says, that is what I'm dealing with, grief. I felt it in my lungs. Oh, Apache tear helps. Oh, thank you. Yes, we breathe it with you, Christy, with you in this grief at this time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Your vulnerability is healing to us all. Amy says, I have been blessed to have found a therapist that supports my spiritual gifting. Oh, I love that. Hi, Amy. I know Amy really well. That's wonderful. What a valuable experience. And then Champagne says, please speak on it when we lose a loved one by them being murdered, how to deal with the grief, with that grief wisely. Would you like to speak on that, Liz? And I'm so sorry,
Sure.
Champagne, if this has happened for you.
Champagne, yes, I'm really sorry too that you've had that experience. That is really hard because we feel like it's out of our control. And anything that's out of our control, we just have a really hard time reconciling with. It's the why, right? And our minds want to attach to meaning and reason. And it's so hard when someone is taken so quickly. And I'm so sorry that you experienced a loss in this way. I have no words.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And just be gentle with yourself, have compassion with yourself. Know that your loved one is still with you. Know that you can sit with them and hold on to your heart and close your eyes and commune with them. And, I'm feeling, peace on the other side, after that experience for them.
And I feel like it's so complex in a situation like that because we need to heal from a violent act. This is something that it's a real effect. There are people who experience complex post-traumatic stress disorder if something happened to their loved one and they didn't actually literally witness it. And this is something that like for frontline law enforcement have to work through too, because they witness it after the fact or sometimes during the fact. But when it is our loved one, and if they have a violent act occur to them, it's this other layer that is making the grief an even more, again, nuanced and profound process. But I think that's a piece that has to be sorted on, healed on as well. How does the heart function in that regard, Liz? If you can, feel into that, or let us know if you've had that experience where we have grief, but then we have this huge other piece as well.
Yeah, thank you for speaking to that, Tricia, because it's true. There is that complex grief, and it is that grief that comes multi-layered, where it's not just that moment in time where we know our loved one is going to pass away and we have that pre-grieving process. It's that sometimes that immediate, death that happens. Then we have the layer, I didn't expect it. In tragedy, we're holding on to the devastation that comes from knowing that our loved one experienced what they experienced. And that place in our mind where our imagination starts to run, and we have to actually pull that back and not allow ourselves to go down that road of imagination, but to remember to just kind of hold our heart to the ground down in the situation and know that we're dealing with more than one level of experience, that it is complex, as you were saying, and that we do need to unwrap that a little bit more and to kind of separate, give ourselves permission to grieve while we're also holding on to our anger or whatever emotion might be present after, what someone experienced, like Champagne, after someone has been murdered. There's also the holding of that too. So it's stepping into being able to hold everything at once. When you're in the grieving process, being able to hold that life moves on past a person's death, that we have to experience work and loved ones and taking care of children and home and everything else, that there's joy that also comes. So holding that place, I can have grief and have joy. Someone in Champagne's situation can have anger and have sadness and can have, the regular joys that come along with life. It is complex. It's stepping into that space, that initiation of being able to hold all aspects of life, like you were saying in the beginning of the show, that big picture thinking, and walk ourselves through it. It's extra self-care. It's taking time for ourselves. It's journaling. It's getting into nature. It's listening to our inclinations of what our soul desires, whether we want that cup of tea or just want to check out with a book for a little while, or take a hot bath, or just that extra nurturing that we need to bring to our soul when it is complex like that.
Yeah. And having someone like a coach or a healer to hold some of that for you, it makes it really does. That's a self-love and just a powerful way that you could service yourself. So, Liz can help with that,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
One of the things I brought to one of my clients was, she was holding the anger and holding grief around loss. And I walked her through anger release exercises.
Yeah.
And it goes from, the why does this happen? And, maybe banging a pillow or throwing a temper tantrum or screaming or, hand screaming where we're screaming in, into our hands. And, and then under that anger is that deep sadness and grief that comes out. And then just allowing ourselves to just like open our hearts and our souls and just letting that emotion pour out of ourselves. It's cathartic. It's really cleansing. I've done it myself after my mom passed away, just stepping into that place where, and I talk about that in my book, where I was able to release the anger and move into that deep sadness underneath.
And the sadness, sometimes we're really afraid to let something like the sadness emerge, or for us to submerge into it, because we're afraid we'll get lost in it. And actually, I just heard this. Oh my gosh, I just heard this in the class, and one of the therapists who teaches the program that I was in said that that her client was afraid she would get lost in that sadness or in her grief. And so the therapist said, "Go ahead, get lost, and I'll hold you here. I will find you." And oh, it was so beautiful, this scene that we got to live. In fact, when that sadness or whatever it is, it is getting better as you are letting it process. It is remembering that it is a process. And there's a distinction between processing and indulging. But if something like this has occurred to you, then processing is what's going to be top of your psyche's list of what to do. So I don't think you really need to worry about it being an indulgent process. But yes, if you have a guide or a healer who can hold space for you and be an anchor for you to come through the other side of it, it's so powerful, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. I know I reached out to my mentors when I was going through my grieving process and reached for books and other tools in my toolkit to help process myself through my grief. And it is giving yourself permission. I very much gave myself permission. I give my clients permission to be in the grief, to be able to give themselves space, because society isn't set up to give permission to the grieving process. We can go up to someone and have a conversation, and you'll notice the topic is quickly shifted. So we need those spaces in society, that time for us to grieve. There are cultures that are actually set up for grieving processes. There are times in some cultures where they'll take a week or a month just to grieve for themselves, for their communities, for the planet, for a day, a week, or a month. And a lot of our cultures, especially here in the West, we have let go of that. It's get over it, go back to work,
It's so true.
and
Yeah,
people want
Western
us to be out of
culture.
it.
Yeah, Western
Yeah, it's
culture
uncomfortable.
is so, we're so, I don't know if it's because we're young, but I mean, I don't know. We're talking about in the States, but Western culture is also like Europe. It's Well, it is younger than a lot of the other ones, but we have issues. I got to say, we got some issues with being able to, like you said, have a grieving as a part of life and to create space for it. In addition to that, just simply spiritual experiences. We have just they call it a monophasic, meaning we only accept one phase, and the phase is either awake or asleep. That's pretty rare. Western is one of the only cultures that accepts only waking or asleep. Every other culture accepts a polyphasic, meaning there are different states of being, of consciousness, and it's kind of strange if you really look at it. And I think even though we are immersed in Western culture, that we can see that other cultures accept some form of the afterlife, and people who are shaman or maybe have specialties in being able to be guides in those areas. And it's really strange, but we have to, maybe this is part of what the younger generation are helping us to do by being awake to that, helping to mature our society back into a space to even just having, I mean, in Judaism, they sit Shiva. That's 7 days. It's dedicated. Something that you do. It's an honorable thing that you do, but it gives the healing space for everyone. So thank you for bringing that up, that we're just not set up for it. We have to create it for ourselves.
And sometimes it's our experiences too that take it to us,
Yes.
or take it to it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Sometimes people don't even think about the afterlife or don't even want to think about death because that's not in our culture until death arises in our life.
Mm-hmm.
Then it opens it up to, oh, is there an afterlife? Does my energy continue on? I think that death is an initiation to opening up more spiritually, to connecting to the other side, to realizing there's more to this existence than just our physical reality. And that can be a gateway for a lot of people into spirituality, into recognizing spirit, and into, getting curious about, okay, will my energy go on?
Yeah. I've seen that's so common. People having spiritual awakenings in tandem with a loss. And that actually was mine. It was my cat. And so when he passed, that triggered my spiritual awakening. Literally, as he was dying, the last stages of his life, one of the things, it's the first thing that I opened up in my psychic, awareness was animal communication. And I kept asking the vets, how am I supposed to know that it's time to assist him? And the doctors were saying he'll let you know, which was infuriating to me because that's not scientific and that's your job. You know what I mean? Like, he'll let you know is philosophical or spiritual, or what do you mean he'll let me know? And it was he was toward the end, and he wasn't drinking water, which is one of the last signs. And so I picked him up in his little frail body, and I went to syringe some water into his mouth, and he shook his head really, really hard, and he was almost completely blind, but he looked me in the eye, and I felt him say into my body, no more. It's time. And that after he passed, that was really my awakening. And it all just started unfolding from that. And then when my father passed, and we were like, he wasn't really in my life, but he's still my relative, my very close relative. And I had a what do they call it? A spontaneous, it's something like it's an SDE. It's like, I can't remember what the S stands for, death experience, where someone that you love dies, but you have some kind of experience of it's like having a near death experience, but I can't remember. I'll write it in the show notes when I remember. You know what it
Shared
is?
experience.
Shared.
Yeah,
Thank
shared
you.
death experience. It's a participation in someone else's death process.
Thank you for that. So it's like near death, but it's shared death. And so I was already a medium at that time, so I didn't even know about that. But I experienced with my father his passing, even though I was in another state. And for a few days, I was like super out of it, like really ungrounded, really astral. And it was hard for me to ground. And I asked spirit, like, why? And they said, because a part of you is on the other side and you're adjusting to that, because we are part of one another. And again, I didn't have a close loving, I mean, I did when I was a kid, but so it just made so much sense to me why loss opens us up spiritually, because a part of us moves to the other side and we're anchored there. And we have to figure out how to ground here as well. But forever, a part of us will be on the other side now.
That's beautiful, Tricia. Thank you for sharing that heartfelt story and your connection, how you opened up and was able, to connect through that experience. That's really beautiful. And it is sometimes those experiences that do open us up. That is awakening. It's opening our third eye. It's opening our crown chakra to the spirit realm and really feeling that connection to spirit, or feeling that connection to source, to the divine, that we are all one, the planet, spirit, us working together, that all is one connection of openness and awakening. That's beautiful.
Thank you for helping me with that S and shared death experience. You all check it out. And I wanted to see, we have Brandi who says hello, that she's seeing us live. Thank you for joining us. Victoria, I blocked a lot of my grief by jumping right into helping my family with our loss. I also felt like I didn't need to grieve because I could talk to them via my gifts. That's beautiful, Victoria. And sometimes people do that. They set their grief aside. That tends to happen in family dynamics. One person sets their grief aside to help everyone else. But yes, I know Victoria, and she is a medium and she's a very powerful healer. So that's beautiful. Thank you for doing that and for sharing it with us. And then Brandi says, my older brother passed away in early June of this year. We're so sorry. So sorry, Brandi.
So sorry, Brandi, for your loss.
We miss him dearly and still are trying to come to terms with he's not here with us, but I feel him with me from time to time. Yeah. Yeah, your love goes on, and the love can't stop, right?
No, the love does not end. It continues on. And we do have ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our relationship just changes. It shifts into that spiritual relationship instead of being that physical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, Victoria says, I didn't realize SDE was a thing. It's what happened during your dad's passing. Me too. During my dad's passing, I didn't know until recently. Oh, okay. I just thought I was being a medium, but it was really significant, like an NDE. Yeah. And then, yes, Brandi, you're so welcome. And so they're not here physically. Sorry, I interrupted, but the relationship is just going on. But it's like we're adjusting to that because the relationship started physically with the physical component, and that's the thing we're sorting out.
So true. Yeah, we're sorting out, not having that physical presence in our life anymore. And then how does that shift? And then we realize, oh, we're energetic beings. Yes, I had this physical relationship in this reality, this earthly existence, but now it shifts over to the spirit realm where we are connected through spirit energy. And it can continue on. And then we realize within ourselves, a reassessment of our life, and that we're not just this physical reality, that we are spirit, that we are soul, and that our energy will go on after we die and commune with our loved ones on the other side, that they'll be waiting for us. I remember, in the hospital room, my grandmother and my great grandmother were there, and they said, we got her. And, they were there to help walk her over to the other side. She was at peace.
Yeah. That's something that people often ask after, they ask psychics, ask mediums, are they okay? And is that something you get asked a lot too? Are they okay? Mm-hmm.
Yes, just on Tuesday, I had someone come in for a reading, and that was their main question, like, are they okay? Yes, on the other side, they're okay. And I also want to say, if there were disagreements, in this lifetime, as they transition, they see differently. They don't have the attachments, those emotional attachments that we have here in this physical plane. And all of that is released, and there's a wider viewpoint of the experience that it was learning and sharing and loving. So all of that is released, and they're very much like holding a space of love for us on the other side. And they're okay.
They've forgiven us. They've forgiven themselves. It's just really, and then that's a wisdom they can bring as we continue to have our relationship with them, and it's so beautiful. I want to hear about your book. Can you tell us about your book? And of course, we have that in the show notes, how you can get Liz's book.
Yes, thank you for asking. It's called Mom Died Last Night, My Shared Death Experience. It's a memoir of death, grief, and afterlife communication. And it goes through my mother's death process, my grieving process, and our afterlife communication. And that can be found on Amazon and on my website, raisethevibewithliz.com.
Oh, that sounds amazing and so healing. And I remember I watched what me and Marley and Me, the movie Marley and Me, which is right, yeah. And I've recommended it to some people who've had loss of animals or dogs, and they're like, I can't. I'm like, no, I promise. It's very healing to walk through that journey with someone else. Really
It is
is.
really healing. And
Mhm.
that's one of the things I recommend. That's one of the things I did. If I was in a place where, oh, I felt like I needed to grieve and I just couldn't get it out, I needed to cry, I would put on a sad movie and just
Mhm.
cry.
Yeah.
That's available to us.
Mhm.
And that's one of the reasons why I published my book, to let people know they're not alone, to let them know that through my experience, maybe that would help them through their experience as
Mhm.
well. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much for writing that book. And oh, Tracy has a comment. Tracy says, my sister-in-law passed away 4 years ago today. Wow. This is always a tough day in the Hamilton household. Perfect timing. Wow. Thank you, Tracy, for sharing, and blessings to your family and your sweet sister-in-law. She is holding space for the family on the other side. Loving you all still.
Yeah.
Well, Liz, this has been just beautiful. I would love to have you on again. I feel like we have so many areas we could go into, and I love the work that you're doing. It's such a gift to us all. So, you guys, Liz, with her book, "Mom Died Last Night," is that what it is? That the name of it? Yeah,
Yes,
good.
that's
Okay, I want to
correct.
make sure I said. And as an intuitive coach, and the group and individual work that she's doing, check her out. The all of her links are in the show notes. And so thank you, Liz. Is there anything else you would like to share as we conclude our conversation today?
I would just like to say thank you, Tricia, for having me on. It's been a beautiful conversation, and I would love to come back and talk about more things. I really feel like, we have a sisterhood with the work that we do. And thank you for your time. Thanks for having me on. And thank you, everyone who's watching now and will watch in the future.
Yes, wonderful. Well, everyone, thank you for joining live and also listening in the replay. That was Liz Peterson, and I feel so warm in my heart right now, even as I'm feeling the heart break that we do feel, both with our own experiences and the ones that we've been sharing today with one another. So, just take care of yourself, be gentle, as Liz recommended, and just dwell on that one thing that Liz said, that you allowed yourself to love this much, that much in this life, and to create that. The creating of that love with your loved one who is past, if they are past, it still goes on and it still blesses all of us. So thank you for that. So that's our show today. Thanks for joining us. And we'll see you again next week at 11 a.m. Pacific. And of course, on the podcast, Charmed Life with Tricia Carr. Thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.